Happy Thanksgiving, ladies and gentlemen. I am Mike Carlson.
I'm Brian Heisenbuttle.
And this is The View from the U.
That's right, Mike. The only sports show out there that will not spend 10 minutes talking about Odell Beckham Jr.'s catch. So, Mike, of course we have the new rankings out. As usual, we have our disagreements with the committee. And, at this point we've decided we've had enough. We've created our own View from the U, top 10. Mike, start us off with our 4 playoff teams. Who do we have?
Well, right now, Brian, I have Oregon in the number 1 spot. Marcus Mariota playing fabulously. They're playing like the best team. Then I have Bama in at number 2, Mississippi State in at number 3, and then a little shocker here, TCU in at number 4.
Yeah, definitely. I don't understand why TCU is just getting hit so hard. They had that Kansas game, but they came back and won, which is good. I really think that you can't look so much at the records in the individual games. You have to look at how well this team is playing. And it's really hard to deny the fact that TCU's on fire. It
is, Brian. It is. And, that was been the big knock with the committee for me and at least from my opinion, is that, TCU plays one close game and, loses an even closer game to Baylor. And then all of a sudden, they're not deserving to be in that top 4. All of a sudden they can't be in that top 4, when in reality, I think they should be in it. If you look at their body of work, look at all the games they've played, they've had a phenomenal season. You can't do better than an A+ with them.
Yeah, so Mike, number 5 through 8 on the outside looking in. Number 5, we have the Ohio State University. Of course, right on the edge with that tough game with Indiana. And 6, we have Florida State, knocking them back just plainly out of not liking Jameis Winston and not seeing consistency and winning those big games by big margins. 7, we have Baylor. Again, they deserve a high spot, but not really super special like they were last year. And then 8, we have UCLA. Of course, big win. We'll talk about that later. But Mike, 9 and 10 we had a bit of a disagreement on.
We did, Brian. I had my 9 team was Michigan State, playing in a tough Big Ten conference. I think they were the team deserving of that 9 spot. And then at 10, I had Auburn. But, obviously we had our disagreements on that.
Yeah, definitely. Of course, 9 I had Georgia. Of course, they've been playing really well, especially with bringing Gurley back. They're on fire. They crushed Auburn, which was really hard to see. And then 10, I have Wisconsin. I mean, they're a 2-loss team, but I feel like they're really underappreciated. And the Big Ten in general isn't regarded as the best conference, nowhere near the SEC or ACC. But Wisconsin's on fire. Melvin Gordon's hot, and I feel like they deserve that 10 spot.
Brian, to that degree, I have to give you that. I have to kind of agree with you there. But, what I saw with Michigan State is that, this is a very good Michigan State team. They've played well all year. And, despite, one hiccup against Ohio State where J.T. Barrett, absolutely just crushed them, they've played well. And I think Auburn, they play in the SEC, Brian. They've played the toughest opponents, and they've managed to get through the schedule for the most part unscathed, only a couple of losses here and there. So that was my reasoning. But let's look at those 5 through 8 teams. If I had to separate those teams, Brian, they're separated by a tick here and there.
Oh, yeah, definitely. It's easy that one loss you drop directly off the map. You go from the outside looking in to not a chance, especially when it's so competitive. And, of course, Florida State's in the official college football poll. But honestly, I don't see any of their potential. They win games because they dig themselves a hole, but it's just shallow enough that they can climb out. If they go in the college football playoff and play Marcus Mariota in Oregon, they're gone. I do not see them being able to shut them down to simulate a Jameis Winston comeback.
Brian, I have to agree with you. And that was my big bugaboo is, that the playoff committee is putting so much weight in, these recent games. TCU plays a close game against Kansas, and all of a sudden they're out of the top 4. Well, Florida State has played close games the entire year, Brian. They haven't won a game, by a large margin in a while. So I think that, if we're going by that rule, if we're going by that logic, then they have to be farther down in the polls.
Hey, you got Louisville, you got Miami, you got Boston College. Granted, big division opponents, but they can't pull out a win. So, Mike, let's go on a bit of rapid fire. We are a bit late this week, so we're not going to spend the entirety of this episode just hitting on all the games. We're going to do a little rapid fire. Mike, give us a little rapid fire action on North Carolina versus Duke.
North Carolina versus Duke. Go Heels. The Carolina Chrome Helmets, Brian, absolutely smashing the Blue Devils. I love what I'm seeing. UNC football, obviously, in a rebuilding type of stage, but this is a good trend. We're trending upward with these guys.
Yeah, next we have USC versus UCLA. Of course, UCLA coming out big. Of course, I decided to talk about this one, not Mike. Painful loss for the Trojans, but it really spoke loud for this UCLA offense, which was so acclaimed at the beginning of the season. Then they had those losses. So they sort of dropped off the map. Brett Hundley's back. He's big. And UCLA's continuing to dominate this rivalry.
Exactly. Now we're going to go Minnesota, Nebraska. Brian, I want to focus on Amir Abdullah here. Still having a great season by, every stretch of the imagination. This is a very good Nebraska Cornhuskers team. And, if you were going to play them in a bowl game, Brian, I'd be worried because, they're one quarterback position away from being a dominant team in the Big Ten.
Yeah, definitely. So next we have Arizona versus Utah. This is a big one. I was picking Utah to keep their hopes alive in the Pac-12 South. no such deal. Arizona coming in, sticking it to the Utes. I mean, it's really great for Arizona. It keeps them in contention with a UCLA loss and them beating Arizona State. They can win the Pac-12 South. But, I mean, Utah just fell apart at the end of the season. There's no other explanation for
Exactly, Brian. You know, Arizona playing great football right now. They're going to have to play even better, though, playing Arizona State. So we're moving on to Ole Miss, Arkansas. Arkansas absolutely destroying, throttling, whatever superlative you want to use to beat Ole Miss, Brian. This Ole Miss team, ever since, losing to Auburn, losing, their big wide receiver, Daquan Treadwell, has just absolutely imploded on themselves.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I agree completely. Next, we have Boston College, Florida State. Of course, the big problem was Jameis Winston pushing the ref out of the way. Of course, I believe it should have been flagged in an ejection. America believes it should have been flagged in an ejection. It's just the ref on duty didn't believe it should be flagged in an ejection. But again, Florida State doing casually what Florida State does, digging themselves a hole, climbing out of the hole, winning it by a small margin, so the cycle repeats. But Mike, next week is a big week. I love this week. Rivalry week, final week. We got a couple of games. We got to give our picks. Let's start with a big Pac-12 game. UCLA versus Stanford. Of course, Stanford's out. They have no chance of winning the Pac-12 North with Oregon playing like they are. But UCLA, with a win, automatically clinches the Pac-12 South and a ticket to the Pac-12 Championship.
Brian, this is a very good UCLA team. They stumbled at the beginning of the year. They're playing really well right now. Brett Hundley starting to finally iron out all those kinks, all those things that, we thought that he was going to iron out at the beginning of the year. I got UCLA by a wide margin in this game, Brian. They're just going to blow out Stanford.
Oh, yeah, definitely. UCLA is definitely on the up, rising stock, as we may say. But especially in the end of the season, sort of the pressure's off for being that number one team. So now they can just play football, and they're playing great football. UCLA takes this one easy.
Okay, Brian, we're going to move on. Arizona State, a battle of the Arizona universities. Wildcats versus the Sun Devils. Who you got?
I feel like against Oregon State, Arizona State got a bit tripped up. I do think that if they played UCLA again, could beat them and win the Pac-12 South. That's not the scenario right now, but I do think they will close it out against Arizona.
Brian, I'm going to have to disagree with you there. U of A, I think, great football team. They have a great year so far. I think they upset Arizona State, and that's my bold prediction for the week. We'll have another one later, but that's one of mine.
All right, Mike. Of course, one of my big favorite games, the showdown in Georgia. Georgia versus Georgia Tech. I mean, ACC versus SEC. Both teams looking for a bid to one of the high bowls. Who you got in this game?
Brian, I like Georgia Tech in this game just because Georgia Tech needs a win if they want to continue that momentum to beat Florida State in the ACC championship game, which is something I am crossing my fingers that will happen. So I got Georgia Tech in this game over Georgia.
Oh yeah, especially when they stumbled for 2 games, they came back knowing that they still had a chance to win this ACC Coastal Championship. Now that they have the Coastal Championship, they're looking to go to a BCS Bowl, high bowl, trying to beat Florida State. And Georgia's the only thing in their way. I think they're going to run it right by them.
I agree with you, Brian.
Florida.
So now we're going to go Michigan versus Ohio State. Not quite what it used to be, but Ohio State's playing at home. Give us your prediction, Brian.
All right, man. This is my bold prediction. Go blue. Michigan beats them. JT Barrett's going to start a little slow. Michigan's going to take advantage. They're going to run the ball. Devin Funchess is going to show up, unlike last week against Maryland. And Michigan's going to win this one a tight one. It'll be just like last year, only without the failed 2-point conversion.
I'll tell you what, not so fast, my friend. I'm going Ohio State in this one. They're playing at home. JT Barrett, do not get too close to him, ladies and gentlemen. You will burn. Playing so well right now. I got to think Ohio State takes this one, again, by a wide margin.
Again, my only problem with that is how he played against Indiana and how the defense sort of faltered. I don't think Ohio State will be able to hold up. So,
okay, Brian, Iron Bowl action this week. This is a big one for us. I love it. I love this matchup. The Iron Bowl, one of the best rivalries in sports. Who you got?
All right, Blake Sims is making us ask AJ McCarron and I love Auburn. I love the Tigers. I love Nick Marshall. He's great. But in Tuscaloosa, I'm just not feeling confident for Auburn. I think Alabama's going to win this one.
Brian, I'm going to have to oppose you on that one once again. I think that Auburn wins it. I love a little chaos with the college football polls. We got 2 weeks left. Why not shake things up? I'm going Auburn in Tuscaloosa, upsetting Alabama.
War Eagle. So, next game. Big game for you, of course, as a odd USC and Notre Dame fan. Of course, they moved the Battle of LA to the previous week for this heavyweight matchup. Right now, who you got?
Brian, as an applicant to both schools, this puts me in a little bit of an awkward position. I think right now USC is reeling a little bit after that loss to UCLA, but I think they're going to play angry, and with Notre Dame just absolutely collapsing after playing Florida State. You know, those games afterwards, I think USC takes this one just because they're playing angry, they're playing inspired.
Yeah, I got USC too, and the only reason for that is that both seem to be falling, but Notre Dame is just falling at a faster rate right now. So, next on the slate we have Ole Miss at Mississippi State, the Egg Bowl, huge BCS implications. Who do you got?
You know, I think Ole Miss is going to continue that downward trend, Brian. They are falling right now just at an unreal rate. I think Mississippi State takes this one, no problem. Dak Prescott's going to have a great game.
Okay, yeah, I totally agree, especially with the absence of Mr. Treadwell. Of course, big repping for Ole Miss, and that defense they have down there in Mississippi State playing awesome. And then, of course, you know, that guy Dak Prescott, we've talked about him a few times. Mississippi State takes this one easy. So, Mike, of course, big one, Florida State, Florida, the final chapter of Will Muschamp. Who you got?
You know, Brian, I love bold predictions, and I think Will Muschamp in his final act as the Florida Gators head coach destroys the Florida State Seminoles, gets carried off the field in what is the oddest final performance as a coach of all time. Florida wins this one, not by a large margin. It's going to be close, but it's going to be awesome, ladies and gentlemen.
You know, Mike, I actually agree with you. We got a pair of bold predictions on here, but here's why. Florida State, when they make their big comebacks, I'm looking mainly at, like, Miami. They've done so by coming back against passing quarterbacks, shutting down that passing game. In Florida's rivalry games, I'm talking particularly about the Georgia game, they ran the ball all over them. I don't know if Florida State can shut down that rush game, and that they're going to run out, they're going to get a lead. We all know this. That's how Florida State operates. But then they're going to be able to run out the clock like no other team can, and they're going to be able to run the ball, an aspect that Florida State hasn't really been perfect at defending, especially when they're so pass-heavy against their opponents.
You know, Brian, I got to agree with you there, but we're doing our final bold prediction, Minnesota versus Wisconsin. What are you thinking, my friend?
You know, I love the Big Ten. The Big Ten is my conference. I don't think there's any way Minnesota beats Wisconsin. I want to see Wisconsin beat Ohio State in the Big Ten championship. Minnesota, fantastic team, well-rounded team, but they can't stop Melvin Gordon. It's as simple as that.
You know, Brian, I got to agree with you there. I think Melvin Gordon tells this team, hey, climb on my back. I'm going to lead you guys to the promised land against this Minnesota team. Melvin Gordon runs all over the Golden Gophers, and the Badgers win this one easily.
Yeah, so Mike, got to close up this episode before championship week. Give us your shout-out for this week.
You know, Brian, I got to give a shout-out to the awesome Carolina Chrome helmets worn by the University of North Carolina. Awesome helmets, awesome look. Did not think the Chrome would look good with that Carolina blue. It looks stunning, ladies and gentlemen. Go buy one. They're phenomenal. That's my shout-out for the week. Cool unis.
All right, Mike, here's a little bit of an unconventional shout-out. Of course, you're a North Carolina fan. I'm going to shout out to Wake Forest, specifically their defense, allowing only 3 points against Virginia Tech in probably the craziest game I've ever seen. Neither team scored a point in regulation. Wake Forest, of course, coming out on top by a margin of 6-3. Ridiculous game. Great job by the Wake defense. And with that, we got to call it a week.
Yes, Brian, we do. For Mike Carlson,
Ryan Heisenbuttle.
this has been The View from the U. We'll see you guys next week. Call me Katy Perry.